There are some times in a person's life when an opportunity comes along that you just can't pass up. And here I am at Sun and Fun 2018, and one of those kinds of opportunities just came up for me. I am gonna fly in that! So this morning, Mike Ladd, my co-host for the morning radio show, we call it the Morning Run-Up, we interviewed and talked for 2 hours with two different B-17 crews. The B-17 Memphis Belle, which was actually the Memphis Belle that was in the movie, and also this B-17, which is a Texas Raiders B-17 with the Commemorative Air Force. We have actually interviewed them on the Morning Run-Up a couple of times before. They're fantastic. And after the show, I get a phone call saying they have an extra seat and they want me to go for a ride in this bad boy. I'm gonna try to bring you guys at least along for the ride and show you what it feels like to be inside this thing when it turns on and takes to the skies. I can count the number of times I've been inside a B-17 on one hand. It's such an incredible airplane that I'm almost ashamed to admit that, but there it is. As I climbed into Texas Raiders, I was reminded just how cramped it is inside. The Fortress was not built for comfort, it was built for war. Moving up to my seat took a lot of effort. For this flight, my designated station was the radio operator station, just behind the bomb bay on the left side of the aircraft. I was to occupy that seat for taxi, takeoff, and landing, but very shortly after we were airborne, we were free to move about the aircraft. The B-17 Flying Fortress is a World War II era bomber produced by Boeing. Its first flight was in 1935. Of the more than 12,000 that were built, only 11 are still airworthy today, and none of those examples ever saw combat. While that number is astounding, back then it just wasn't worth it to bring back old war-tattered aircraft from Europe after the war ended. Normally when I fly in other people's airplanes, I try to capture every single angle with a slew of GoPro cameras, but this time I didn't have any of that available. I wasn't planning to do any flying at Sun and Fun this year, so I didn't bring any of my normal let's go flying gear. The men and women that crew and support the aircraft of the Commemorative Air Force can best be thought of as ambassadors to our collective heritage and the legacy of those who have fought for our freedom. Kevin Michaels, call sign K5, gave us our passenger safety briefing and also gave us a bunch of tips and tricks to ensure we had the best experience possible. Once we started taxiing out, K5 was waving at people standing by outside. When this behemoth comes to life, people on the ground watch. The Fortress commands attention, and the crew gives them the show that they want. Of course, this episode isn't about seeing this thing from the outside. I was on the inside, and I could not stop smiling. I'm not ashamed to admit that I was downright giddy to have this opportunity for a flight inside the Fortress. I'm pretty sure I smiled the entire time, and so did all of the other passengers. The crew issued each of us earplugs before the flight. Obviously that seemed like a reasonable idea at the time, but it had the surprising side effect of actually letting me hear the plane better. Because my ears weren't being bombarded with a gazillion decibels of roar from the four Wright radial engines, which, by the way, produce a combined 4,800 horsepower, I was able to hear the details, the whirs, the creaks, the life in the airframe. If moving around the aircraft while it was parked on a ramp was difficult, moving around while airborne was an even greater challenge. The weather was by no means bad, but the plane certainly moved around in the sky. For me, moving around was a very deliberate exercise. The waist gunner positions on each side of the plane aft of the wing are open to the outside. Texas Raiders also flies with what I can only call the sunroof removed. This makes the airplane very drafty inside. While that was fine at the low altitudes at which we flew, I cannot imagine flying for hours on end at altitude. It must have been miserable for our boys. That being said, there's something very surreal about sticking your head up out the top of a bomber into a 140 knot wind stream. Highly recommended. Later in the flight, I was able to make my way through the very cramped bomb bay towards the cockpit. The pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer were all very busy. The engineer had a checklist in hand ready to assist the flight crew with the next phase of flight when called upon. This is a very hands-on airplane. No autopilot to take over and give the crew a rest. Our pilot was constantly looking around, eyes outside the cockpit. The instrument panel looked very much like it did during the war, although there were a couple of modern avionics upgrades, like the Garmin GPS units on the overhead panel. As I'm putting this video together, it occurs to me just how much work it is to fly the Beast on this bright sunny day. Now imagine you fill the sky with hundreds of other bombers in close formation, in bitter cold, with flak and enemy fighters ready to take you down. The discipline and dedication these men had is incredible, and it must have been exhausting. My hat's off to them. All too soon, the ride was over and we found ourselves on final approach to Lake Linda Regional Airport. I made my way back to the radio operator station, strapped my seatbelt low and tight across the hips, and waited for the runway to come up to meet us. Man, what a ride.
What do you say after you get out of an airplane like this to somebody who you want to understand what that experience is like? And I gotta tell you, I don't know what to tell you other than you gotta try this. This is a fantastic airplane. It lives, it breathes, it's windy and gusty, and the engines are loud, but it's not just the engines. There's these other motor sounds and hydraulics and electronics and just everything that you hear. And everybody in this airplane was just like just walking all over, crawling all over it. It's a bit like Sun and Fun itself, and the fact that one flight isn't enough to really just fully experience the thing. I tried to suck up as much as I could, knowing that I just didn't have a lot of time because we were only in the air for 20-25 minutes, but I got as much as I could. It is remarkable, so much power, and yet everything is so closed in and big and small at the same time. I know it doesn't make much sense, but it was incredible. If you ever get the chance to fly one of these things, you owe it to yourself to feel that power, to see what these guys, these teenagers, these 21-year-olds, 22-year-old kids experienced when they were going to war in these kinds of machines. It is a spectacular experience, highly recommended. So I just want to end by giving a humongous thanks to the Texas Raiders for keeping this airplane alive, giving me the ride of a lifetime in it, and allowing other people to check this bird out because it is unbelievable. Come see it here at Sun and Fun. Come see it wherever they fly. Come go walk through it. And if you really have the means, go fly in this bird. It's amazing. You will not regret it. Bye.